Good afternoon, everyone from Japan time, and I hope you're doing well. So we're gonna have now a session of adjusting governance lens that will be presented by 5 speakers. And first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Rayhan Dudayev. I am from Indonesia. Blue Ventures Indonesia is my organization, marine conservation organization. So it's a great pleasure to chair this session. And the first speaker will be CALVAN Dennis. He's from Rare, Philippines. And the second speaker will be Mina HORI from Kochi University, Japan, and then Kaumi Lakmali PIYASIRI from National Aquatic Resources Research and Development Agency, Sri Lanka, and the third one would be Rosewine JOY, Presidency University, India, and then Andrew Song from University of Technology, Sydney, Australia. And the last one would be Sonja GANSEFORTH, hope I pronounce your name correctly, from Dutch Institute for Japanstudien, Japan. Okay, it's German, I guess, yeah, or okay. So yeah, I will give to the floor to Dennis, CALVAN Dennis. So the time would be 12 minutes for the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ryan. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for providing us, our organization, RARE, a platform to present how recent developments on decentralization in the Philippines can advance sustainable small-scale fisheries. We thought that our topic is relevant as we celebrate the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture this year in 2022, and in light of the recently concluded national and local election in our country. So I am Dennis CALVAN. I'm the Senior Manager for Policy and Government Engagement of RARE Philippines. And I would like to present our observations in terms of recent opportunities to advance small-scale fisheries vis-a-vis the devolution process in the Philippines. I would like to briefly introduce our organization, which is called RARE. We are a non-government organization that works with around 84 coastal cities and municipalities in the Philippines in order to protect and manage the coastal fisheries within the 15-kilometer municipal waters. We coordinate with coastal local government units in order to facilitate positive behavior change that leads to people fishing at the right place, at the right time, and with the right gear. The flow for my presentation is very simple. I would like to start with the status of small-scale fisheries in the Philippines by focusing on their social, economic, and environmental conditions. Then I will be underscoring the importance of local government units in terms of improving these conditions by looking at the pathways of improving local fisheries governance. I will end at pointing out the opportunities as well as the prospects for advancing sustainable fisheries by riding on the decentralization process in the Philippines. So to start, I would like to first inform you on what we mean by small-scale fisheries. I know each country has a different meaning of small-scale fisheries. But in the Philippines, we are governed by two relevant national laws, particularly Republic Act number 8425 and Republic Act number 8550 as amended by Republic Act number 10654. Republic Act number 8425, or the Social Reform and Poverty Alleviation Act, referred to artisanal fisherfolk as the municipal small-scale or subsistence fishermen who use fishing gear which do not require boats or which only require boats 3 gross tons. On the other hand, RA 8550 as amended by RA 10654 defines municipal fishers as those directly or indirectly engaged in municipal fishing and other related fishing activities. When we mean by municipal fishing as referred to by RA 8550, we mean by it is fishing within municipal waters using fishing vessels of 3 gross tons or less, or fishing not requiring the use of fishing vessels. So in 2018, based from the data of the Philippine government, small-scale fishers, both men and women, numbered around 1.9 million based from the fisheries registration system of the Department of Agriculture. However, currently in 2021 or 2022, we have around 2.3 million registered fisher folk in the country. On the other hand, based from the 2018 government data, we have 29,504 registered municipal fishing boats. And one of the prevailing conditions of most small-scale fishing communities in the Philippines is the high poverty incidence rate. This is based from the Philippine Statistics Authority, which is the primary government agency on data. In 2015, the national poverty incidence rate in fishing communities was 34%. No, it's very high. In terms of poverty incidence. However, in 2018, poverty incidence rate in fishing communities dropped from 36.9% to 26.2% in 2018. Aside from the prevailing poverty conditions in the fishing communities, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing is also prevalent. In a study conducted in 2021, Rare is part of, between 257,000 to 400,000 metric tons per year, which amounts to between 24.1 to 37.8 billion pesos, are lost from illegal fishing from the municipal fishery subsector. The same way that between 309,000 or 485,000 metric tons per year, which amounts to between 29 to 45.6 billion pesos, are being lost from the municipal fishery subsector due to unreported fishing. Most small-scale fishing communities in the Philippines are also highly vulnerable to extreme weather events. And this presentation indicates that most of the extreme weather events such as typhoons, we track it from 2016 to 2020, hit our fishing communities in the Philippines. And it damages a lot. The total cost of damage in fishery sector per typhoons are widely reported by the government, and it showed that fishing communities are heavily damaged by extreme weather events. And also during the pandemic lockdowns, limited movements and disruptions in the supply chain caused significant loss to small-scale fisheries in the country. As reported by the Philippine government, there was a 94.3 million pesos that was lost from unsold produce. And for the fishery sector, around 8.78 million pesos was lost in Luzon alone due to the pandemic. And it is within this context, the high poverty incidence, the extreme weather events, the prevalence of the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and pandemic, among others, the importance of local government units or LGUs as frontline to ensure sustainable small-scale fisheries is highlighted. The recent development on decentralization in the Philippines in light of the Mandanas-Garcia ruling that entails increase in budget for local governance opens up opportunities to advance sustainable small-scale fisheries in the Philippines. The World Bank defines decentralization as the transfer of authority and responsibility for public functions from the central government to intermediate and local governments or quasi-independent government organizations and or the private sector. Decentralization is not new in the Philippines. In fact, our laws promote decentralization as indicated in this presentation. For instance, decentralization is heavily promoted in the 1987 Philippine Constitution, the same way that it is reflected and articulated in several national laws, like the Republic Act 7160 or the Local Government Code of 1991, and Republic Act 8550 as amended by RA 10654. And as I mentioned a while ago, the recent development on the devolution, decentralization through the Mandanas-Garcia ruling, which is a Supreme Court ruling, led to the issuance of an executive order that promotes and advances full devolution of certain functions of the executive branch to the local government. Our constitution, as well as our national laws, promotes different forms of decentralization, like decentralization of power and decentralization of administration. When we say decentralization of power, in the Philippines, national government agencies abdicate certain political power in favor of the autonomous local government units. It grants LGUs the freedom to chart their own destinies and to shape their futures with minimum intervention from the central government. This is very pronounced, no, as practiced in several political arrangements in the Philippines, like the Autonomous Region for Muslim Mindanao and the Cordillera Autonomous Region. Then there's the decentralization of administration, wherein it delegates administrative powers to LGUs by the central government, and it makes local government units more responsive and accountable. And it also promotes or ensures LGUs' fullest development as self-reliant communities. And if the assumption is governance at the local level are more directly responsive and effective. No? So there are also several categories of decentralization, but I would like to focus on the first, the political decentralization or devolution, which I think is very relevant to advancing small-scale fisheries in the Philippines. So when we say devolution, it's the transfer of powers, responsibilities, and resources from the central government to the LGUs for the performance of certain functions. The national government confers power and authority upon the various local government units to, as mandated under the relevant national laws. So the Mandanas-Garcia Supreme Court ruling was issued in finality last 2019. It's a ruling that corrected the errors in terms of computation of the internal revenue allotment, which simply it corrected or increases the share of the local government units in the national internal revenue taxes. Simply more budget for the local government units. So the positive impact for the Mandanas-Garcia ruling for the local government units is the perceived increase, no, in terms of shares on the budget. So this is based from the national government's presentation or data, wherein around 37.89% of budget increase will be observed among local government units in 2022, which is the start of the implementation of the Mandanas-Garcia ruling. But on the other hand, it has a negative fiscal impact, this time for the national government agencies, wherein their disposable cash for the 2022 and for the next years would be decreasing. In terms of governance framework, simply the local government units will be mainly responsible for devolved functions under the local government code. And the national government agencies, on the other hand, will be shifting from rowing to steering and will simply function the following, in terms of the development of policy and service delivery standards, capacity building, provision of technical assistance, as well as LGU compliance monitoring. So what functions are devolved are we talking about when we say LGUs will be mainly responsible for the both functions. No? Under the local government code, in terms of fisheries, the local government units will be functioning in terms of dispersal of fingerlings, promoting and supporting seedling materials for aquaculture, enforcement of fishery laws, conservation of mangroves, as well as management operationalization of community fish landing centers.
Excuse me, Dennis.
Wrapping up now. For the opportunities to advance small-scale fisheries, simply fisheries management program now will no longer be an optional for local government units, but it will become mandatory. And in terms of budget, local government units will have more budget and in order to craft and implement policies, and responsibility and accountability of LG leaders to prioritize fisheries management program. And of course, as mandated under the several laws, the empowerment of fisherfolk communities is also a function of the local government units. And I think that's my final slide. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for your presentation. Yeah, I mean, it's that'll be great to have further discussion on the decentralization in Philippines. And yeah, the next speaker will be Mina HORI. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, yes. Please, the time is yours. 12 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Let me share my slides. Okay, I hope. There we go. And wrong. Wait a moment. That is something wrong. There we go. Good. I hope you can see my slides.
Yes.
Okay, good. Oh, wait a moment. I'm not sure how am I doing wrong. I think I'm doing something wrong. Okay, there we go. Okay, thank you very much, Chair. My name is Mina HORI, and today I'm from southern part of Japan, Kochi, where you can see facing the Pacific Ocean. It's rather southern part. And today I would like to present about the constraints to continue eco-labeling case study from coastal small-scale fisheries in Kochi, Japan. This work was done together by Ms. Hazuki Shimanouchi and Toshiyuki Okawa. Let me start with what is eco-labeling in marine capture fisheries products. I'll be focusing only on capture fisheries today because of the limited time. There's a statement that says eco-labels are seals of approval given to products that are deemed to have fewer impacts on the environmental than functionally or competitively similar products by OECD, which can be applied not only for the fisheries products, but also for the agricultural products as well. And while the FAO statement says the goal of the eco-labeling initiatives is to promote sustainable managed fisheries and highlight their products to consumers. So quickly looking back, the history I'm skipping a lot, but the importance of eco-labeling achieved international consensus as part of the global push towards sustainable development at Agenda 21 on 1992 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. And in 1997, for Sustainable Fisheries, Marine Stewardship Council was established. And in 2005, FAO Committee on Fisheries, COFI, adopted guidelines for marine fishery eco-labeling. And 2012, the London Olympics was the first time to set the sustainability procurement of standards, which was handed over to Rio 2016 Olympics and 2020 Tokyo Olympics, which was supposed to be a good chance to accelerate for Japanese fisheries export and raise public awareness for government, since eco-labeling in Japan was rather slow comparing to other parts of the world. There's a data that almost 70% of consumers and fishers didn't know what are the MSC eco-label logo is on 2016. While in Japan, Marine Eco-Label Japan, which I'll be calling MEL after all, was established on 2007 under Japan Fisheries Association. The purpose was to get ready for the Olympics, support export, contribution for SDGs, and building public awareness on sustainable use of fishery products. But that's kind of front door. And back door was MSC was too costly, and small scale fishing in Japan has many varieties with long history of local rules, which wasn't really matching MSC certification system at that time. So they wanted Japanese fisheries friendly kind of system, which was much easier for the Japanese fishers to apply for. And in 2016, to ensure the independence of the certification body, they changed to MEL Council, Marine Eco-Label Japan Council. In Japan, for capture fisheries, there's only two eco-label that has been used. One is MSC and the another one is MEL. The MSC is established overseas, of course, and only 10 fisheries has been certified in 2021. However, there are more for the COC. There are 300 holders. While for the MEL, there are 43 fisheries has been certified, and there are 28 holders for COC in 2020. And in Kochi Prefecture, there are 4 species, 6 fisheries has been certified. Skipjack tuna in 2011 by trawling for 76 vessels. Alfonsino fish, 2011 for driftline, 60 vessels, handline with flies for 104 vessels, handline with bait for 44 vessels, and southern mackerel, which I'll be talking after all, 2011 with vertical long line fishing and 30 vessels, and silver striped brown herring, 2013 for the medium size per seine for 45 vessels. There's several studies about the system of MEL comparing with MSC, how it's underdeveloped, but there's less study about how actual fisheries has been certified and what are the effects. Therefore, we set the question such as, what are the merits of getting MEL, especially for the fishers? What was the procedure for the certification? Was it fisheries oriented or government oriented, or only 4 species? And what will be the next step for the Kochi prefecture? So the survey methods are data collection from the Fisheries Experimental Station in Kochi Prefecture Office about the category of fish, catch data by month and unit price of 4 species. And we conducted interview questionnaire survey by face-to-face and phone and email from September to December 2020. About the Fisheries Policy Division, Fisheries Promotion Department, Kochi Prefecture Office, Japan Fisheries Cooperative, JF Kochi, and JF Skumo Bay, and 4 local supermarkets, which is called Sunny Mart, Sunshine, Sun Plaza, lots of sun, and Coop Kochi. The results of the interview survey to prefecture office was the purpose of the getting MEL certification was to promote local production for the external consumption. This is kind of a new concept for the rural area, rural province. We are facing serious population decrease. So first concept was local production, local consumption, but then it has been upgraded to local production and external consumption, and to increase in fish price and become popular during the 2020 Olympics. Support and publicity activities, and the Kochi Prefecture subsidized half of the certification cost, and PR on website, printing brochure, direct selling, and PR at antenna shop. This, I think it's Japanese word, that the prefecture, each prefecture had small shop in Tokyo or Osaka, or rather big cities, to sell their products and also provide information about tourism or immigration. And also the seafood show. And effectiveness by certification, they really could not realize it, so they consider it as no effect. And possible reasons of no effect was distribution channel for certification product was not ready. Recognition of MEL was quite low at the time, consumers as well as the traders. And this is the result of unit price of southern mackerel. There are two categories for southern mackerel. One is regular catch, which is MEL certified, and it's treated fresh and sometimes alive in all sizes. And there's brand Shimizu Saba, also MEL certified, because all the catch are certified. And they're treated alive and only over 620 grams per head. The table shows the average treated amount in kilograms in vertical left axis, while line graph shows the unit price yen per kilogram in right axis. It was certified in 2011, where red arrows are, but the unit price didn't really change much. It was rather change of less catch, higher price. And other three species didn't show any trend in before and after the MEL certification. Just going to quickly show about the brand of this fish. It's caught alive and kept in tank. Then fisher will run when they get back to the port and put them in the swimming pool, and they'll stock it. And next day morning, very early time, they prepare to ship from downtime and ship at 5 a.m. by air. Before they were using tractors, it took one extra day, so now they use air, and it arrives at restaurant and served on same day in Tokyo. And they also conduct special treatment of what we call shinkejime. It's breaking nerves of the fish, which keeps the meat very fresh. They put the wire in, I think they're doing this here at the number 5 picture. They put the wire and break the nerves. So this is how they put the MEL sticker after fisher is certified. It starts from fisher, wholesaler, processor, distributor, retailer, restaurants, and go to the consumer. And JF Kochi got both production stage and COC certification. If all the people involved in distribution channel had COC certification, fish will be delivered with MEL sticker to the consumer. However, what happened was if one or more member of the distribution channel do not have COC certification, MEL sticker will discontinue. This happened in case of Kochi Prefecture. Even JF had COC certification, most of the products were delivered to consumer without the sticker. So the consumer cannot distinguish the eco-labeled products. Even the products itself was eco-labeled. And especially in case of Japanese small-scale coastal fisheries, these wholesaler or buyer sellers are just individual person or family or sometimes extended family, very small scale. So it is very difficult for them to get the certification one by one. There's another special rule for supermarkets. I just named it consigned MEL sticker putting system, that the special system that they can put MEL sticker without getting COC certification. The COC certified body in here, JF Kochi, can set consigned MEL sticker putting system. They can choose trusted companies, supermarkets. So the supermarket can put MEL sticker without getting COC certification. With the consent of 3 supermarkets, only 1 supermarket with 2 stores use this system. 3 fish species were sold with MEL stickers. Prefectural officer also attended for PR in store. It was done only a few times and they stopped. Other 2 supermarkets person in charge of fishery products do not remember about the MEL at all. And MEL was renewed with the GSSI certified in 2019, when the Global Sustainable Seafood Initiative certified new MEL was started. It promised fair and global standards for the certification. And from 2021, January 31, old MEL was expired unless the renewal procedure has been taken. In 2021, February 1st, only V2, the new one, will be qualified. So what happened for the Kochi fisheries? All 6 fisheries in Kochi was V1 and renewal process was necessarily. However, all 6 fisheries in Kochi couldn't proceed to V2. So this comes the discussion and issues to solve. The first is the high cost. Individual fishers and traders cannot afford $15,000 for the production certification and $5,000 COC certification. So the reasonable cost settings certification for small scale should be considered. And low standards, especially for the B1, in case of southern mackerel, branding seems to be more powerful than male certification. Size, post-harvest treatment should be included in state standards. Currently, only fishing method is considered. And the difficulty to shift to new male council V2 system. Fishers couldn't find the merit of male because of the same price and more work, the complicated procedure, so they lost the motivation to continue. As a wrap up, what we learned from this failure is if government really wants to push the system, it's not only the matter of the fishers, but traders, processors, and consumers needs to understand, realize the meaning of eco-labeling, and government needs further awareness building, not only for the fishers. And this is the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mina, for your presentation on the eco-labeling in Japan and the Kochi prefecture. And the next presenter will be Kaumi, and I will play our presentation. Can you all see my screen?
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank the organizers of the conference for letting me join the conference via a pre-recorded video presentation, because I'm quite sure that you have heard about the tremendous economic crisis that we are
going to disturb. It's in white.
Which has led.
Sorry?
It's all white, the slide.
Ah, okay. A second. It's good now?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
To prolonged power cuts during day and night. So it is quite uncertain whether I would be able to do my presentation under the current energy crisis. So that's why I decided to to join with you like this, so you will not suffer from our domestic issues. Thank you and welcome to my presentation on towards securing tenure rights of small-scale fishers, reconciling ethics in SSF guidelines. So simply the term tenure refers to how rights to natural resources such as land, rivers, coasts, and forests are assigned within societies or assigned among resource users. So fisheries tenure is closely related to the idea of the right to use of fisheries and coastal resources, whether formal or informal. Small-scale fishing communities, in fact, need secure and stable access to fishing grounds and other resources like the coast, so they can bring their catches ashore, have a place to sell them, dry fish and anchor their crafts, and most of all, a place to live. Therefore, it could be argued that the secured tenure rights form the basis of the social and cultural well-being of small-scale fishers. Tenure rights can be categorized into two sections: customary rights and state laws. Customary laws are based on values, beliefs, traditions, principles, and working rules of the fishing communities. So those customary laws have implications for their customary access to fisheries resources, the coast, and adjoining land. In Sri Lanka, the Fisheries and Aquatic Resources Act number 20 of 1996 and its subsequent amendments, and the Coast Conservation Act number 57 of 1981 and its subsequent amendments provide the legal foundation for access rights to fishes. Sri Lanka embarked on the process to implementing the FAO voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable fisheries during the period of July 2018 to May 2019, with the assistance of the International Collective in Support of Fish Workers and the FAO. One of the main activities of this implementation process was the National Stakeholder Consultation Program, which made an effort to identify the issues related to the SSF sector. So these stakeholder meetings were carried out in 12 out of the 15 coastal districts in Sri Lanka, with the participation of fishing community representatives, including women. And this presentation is based on the Stakeholder Consultation Program on tenure issues, conducted on tenure issues in Sri Lankan SSF sector. Yeah, this is a photograph of the one of the stakeholder consultation programs. And since the revealed issues concerning tenure rights were found to be quite common to all districts, the results are presented here for the aggregated sample for all provinces, all districts. So I think it's quite clear for you that the power asymmetry between the fishers and tourism stakeholders, especially the hoteliers, was clearly seen as the main issue in respect of tenure rights. So it was revealed that the considerable extent of land bordering the beach around the country had been accumulated in the hands of the hoteliers, both local and foreign. The utmost lament of the coastal fishers of all 12 districts was that they had been gradually losing their traditional access routes to the beach, the space on the beach to anchor their crafts, beach scenic sites, and fish drying areas due to the continuous constructions of hotels and resorts along the coastal region bordering the beach, which even fall within the no-bait zones of the beach as laid down in the Coast Conservation Act of 1981. So it is a clear example of fishers losing both their customary and legal tenure rights to powerful stakeholders, such as tourism stakeholders. So here I just wanted to show you that those results are in line with the results of a study we carried out in Southern Province on conflicts among coastal resource users, where respondents ranked power asymmetry among resource user groups and the poor recognition and respect towards the rights of the other resource user groups as the two major issues which have contributed towards the emergence of conflicts among coastal resource users, coastal stakeholders. So here are the suggestions people came up with during the consultation program towards addressing the issues related to the tenure rights of small-scale fishing communities. Identify, record, and respect traditional and customary rights of fishers to the fisheries resources. Identify and demarcate the coastal zones for fisheries activities and for tourism development. Provide space and facilities for craft anchorage, fish drying, and fishing equipment storage on the beach and in the adjoining lands. So So here once again, we show you the results of the study we mentioned earlier, carried out in Southern Province, which highlights the importance of state intervention towards securing fisheries tenure rights by showing that the resource users expect strong intervention by the authorized institutes in resource use management, especially to protect their customary rights and access to fisheries resources. Now, here we show the relevance of SSF guidelines towards addressing tenure issues of small-scale fishers. Actually, governance of tenure in small-scale fisheries and resource management form the 5th section of the SSF guidelines, and the articles 5.2 to 5.12, especially the articles 5.3, 5.4, 5.9, and 5.12 point out the responsible governance of tenure in small-scale fisheries. The guidelines acknowledge the secure, equitable, and socially and culturally appropriate tenure rights, the need for recognizing, respecting, and protecting legitimate and customary rights of fishers, and the need for facilitating equitable access to fisheries resources. So it is quite clear that the focus and coverage on securing tenure rights in the SSF guidelines is unrivaled. So it could be argued that the effective implementation of the SSF guidelines would be a critical step towards finding solutions for tenure issues the small-scale fishers in Sri Lanka are confronted with. So let me now briefly enlighten you about the outcome of these stakeholder consultation programs. So based on the suggestions presented at the consultations, the existing fisheries policy was remodeled, and a small-scale fisheries policy was proposed, incorporating the provisions in the SSF guidelines towards resolving issues in small-scale fisheries sector. So here are the new policy statements on tenure rights in the proposed SSF policy, which was presented to the government in 2020. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was presentation from Kaumi. So the next presenter will be Rosewine JOY. Are you here already? Okay, so we can move to Andrew. You're still muted.
Yeah, hi. Okay, pull out my presentation.
Can you share your screen?
Yes. Okay, hi. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Andrew Song, and I'm based at the University of Technology Sydney in Australia. And today I will be presenting a research that's based on a book that's being written with two of my colleagues, Aline Kadfak at Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences and Kate Barkley from University of Technology Sydney in Australia. So because this is an ongoing work and we haven't finished the book and we haven't actually got to the full analysis yet, I will present the intent of the book, what the book is about, what the research is about and why the rationale for it, and also present some of the early results, early insights that have come out of it. So this research is about IUU fishing, and it is about trade-related measures to fight IUU fishing. So as many of us know about the IUU fishing, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. It's a big problem globally and nationally, as Dennis has outlined in the case of the Philippines. But yeah, some of the stats are quite stark. I think the Pew research, they estimated that 1 in 5 wild-caught fish is associated with IUU fishing. On an aggregate level, IUU fishing represents the second largest fish producer in the world by value after China. So it is a massive problem. It can have large social, environmental, and economic consequences. It can degrade the marine ecosystem through bycatch, disturbance of seabed floor, and overfishing, etc. It can distort economic competition by giving unfair advantage to the perpetrators while disadvantaging those who follow the rules. It can disrupt livelihoods and food security of, again, the legitimate operators. And it has been shown to have linkages to slave labor, human rights violation, and also transnational crime. So there are certainly various moves and various initiatives to fight IUU fishing. And it has developed into this very robust IUU narrative, which is based on a definition offered by the 2001 FAO International Plan of Action, which defines what illegal fishing, unreported, and unregulated fishing is in a somewhat sort of management terms. I won't go into it here, but what I like to highlight is that as a result, over time, IUU fishing has become this sort of catch-all concept, and it became to represent the entire range of fishing activities that's inconsistent or with or violating management or conservation measures. So anything that's sort of against the law or sort of problematic, the IUU fishing label can be applied these days. So there have been some criticisms on such sweeping characterization. And one of them being most notably that sort of a very broad characterization of IUU fishing can trivialize or small-scale fisheries diversity and its legitimacy of its operation and governance system, and sort of the sustainability model that it promotes. So that's one of the threats of this very strong IUU narrative, but that doesn't mean that IUU fishing is something that needs to be addressed. So over time, there have been two main approaches to deal with this issue. Very broadly, one is traditional measures based on monitoring, control, and surveillance activities. This relies on the jurisdictional power of a sovereign state to go out and do the law enforcement at sea and have a monitoring scheme and actually send out the Coast Guard boats and catch the perpetrators and apply sanctions and penalties, etc. But as you can imagine, that type of activity is very expensive and needs a lot of resources. And also there can be a problem of coordination between multiple countries, as the fish itself and also some of the illegal vessels can be very fluid across boundaries. So this has led to some limited effectiveness. To complement this approach, trade-based measures have sort of come about to strengthen the measures, and the whole idea of this is to make IUU operation economically unviable by either reducing revenues coming from IUU fishing or increasing costs of IUU activities. So it's all to do with reducing the incentives to commit IUU fishing. And this trade-based approach has certain advantages in terms of cost of implementation, and also it can have a large geographical reach without being restricted by costs and resources. Broadly speaking, trade-based measures can be classified into two categories. One is catch certification schemes. It's somewhat, it has a similar idea to the eco-labeling described by Mina, but yeah, it's essentially a packet of certified information generated by exporting countries, and this sort of paper or computer-based data needs to be attached to each shipment, and so that importers know that this fish coming in, getting imported, is not coming from IUU sources. So it has been used by regional fisheries management organizations before. The other category is called, can be termed as trade sanctions, and also used by regional fisheries management organizations before. But this one's more punitive and sweeping than catch certification schemes, as it's not just shipment based, but it can be the sanction, the trade ban can be applied to entire countries or entire species coming from a particular country. So European Union, being the world's largest market in importer of fish, has implemented these two type of trade measures unilaterally. So they devised themselves. It wasn't part of a regional fisheries management organizations and so forth, that they devised it themselves and started implementing against the rest of the world, really. And they can do that because they have the market power. So cutting access to to European market is a big blow to many exporting countries. So they wield that market power. The EU-IUU regulation is very extensive in scope. The catch certification scheme applies to all traded fish product. So any species, any volume from anywhere wants to export to the EU, there's this catch certification requirement. Also, the EU applies this blanket ban on all seafood import from the country. So it's a countrywide ban, not just species-wide ban, but countries-wide ban. If certain countries are classified by the EU as non-cooperating third countries, and to do that, they first issue a yellow card as a warning, and if nothing improves, then the EU institutes a red card, which means now there is an import ban. So the EU is currently the only jurisdiction unilaterally adopting this quite drastic measure, and in doing so, what the EU is doing is they are in a position to directly advise various countries, exporting countries, how they should reform their domestic fisheries. Secondly, they are also sending a normative message out to the world that IUU fishing is a thing to be eradicated, and we are acting on this. We are sort of the IUU police in a sense. So you better watch out. There will be high consequences. The EU is not the only country using trade-based measures. The United States, since 2018, is doing something similar, something on a smaller scale, more species-based. There are differences, and Japan is also soon. They're in the move to require certificate of legal catch from other governments. So that is expected to come in the near future. Overall, there is general optimism that these type of trade measures, through economic pressure, could actually contribute to improving the situation of IUU fishing. There are calls to expand and replicate this type of approach across many countries. So the proliferation of unilateral trade-based measures is actually quite real, and certainly that has been the trend in the last 10 years or so. So this research looks at this and asks three main questions. to what extent the trade-based measures will succeed in spreading to other countries? Would other importing nations consider implementing similar trade-based measures? And for those countries who may face trade sanctions, how receptive and responsive are they to conform to the new rules? So we propose researching how, using the EU policy as an example, because it's the longest running and most sort of biggest policy that's out there, we will look at how non-EU countries themselves perceive, implement, or comply with these type of measures as a way to gauge the potential of such unilateral measure to scale out and affect IUU fishing outcomes. These questions matter because proliferation likely means, more countries, more different countries adopting and implementing this type of a trade restrict measures will mean greater negative consequences to more countries worldwide. And they'll be slapped with a bigger burden of compliance and also threat of trade sanctions. And one analyst actually said, quoting that proliferating unilateral instruments may reveal itself as a de facto barrier to trade. So it could actually become a very unfair trade restriction to many countries, exporting countries. Understanding the spread of these measures can actually go some way towards understanding effectiveness of the EU-IU regulation itself. So it's about how it's sort of a relational sort of understanding. The success of something is only to the extent that the other affected actually follows it. And we will rely on policy diffusion concept as a way to think about the spread of this policy. So we offer this book will offer case studies of 2 non-EU countries who are on the receiving end of this policy, Thailand and Australia. We focus on country experiences through empirical research. So this is not a policy analysis per se. The Thailand is a large exporter of seafood to the EU. So the Thailand case would be an example of a deliberate push by the EU to spread this regulation to the world. Thailand actually received yellow card in April 2015, which was lifted in 2019. On the other hand, Australia is a net importer of fish and only exports a small volume to the EU. So they are not a direct target of the EU policy, but the question is they may adopt a similar measure themselves against countries it imports from. So just briefly touching on the 2 cases, and then I'll have a final slide. The key question for the Thailand case is how have the EU-led reforms shaped Thai national fisheries policy? So certainly the EU has had put pressure on the Thai government to do the reform and conform to the way the EU idea of how IUU fishing should be addressed, and the EU preferred strengthening traceability and MCS capabilities of the Thai government. But interesting thing is that domestically, the issues of labor rights violations came out as a strong local priority, which shifted the makeup of the reform. Also, there has been some evidence that small-scale fishers have been actually positively supported through this whole reform process, since the Thai government mainly went after large-scale fishing vessels on the basis that the EU does not import much small-scale fishers products anyway. So small-scale fishers sort of benefited by Thai government going after the industrial sector. For Australia, the main question was how a country with developed fisheries management structures and one that's active supporter of multilateral free trade regime react to this type of a unilateral trade measure. Here we are focusing on the discursive factors that may influence the diffusion of trade-related measures. So we are looking at things like how IUU fishing is being framed as a policy issue and what that means for policy tools in the country. We're seeing that traceability is associated with ensuring food safety mainly, and not really had to do with combating IUU fishing. in Australia. So the role of post-harvest sectors such as trade in the management of fisheries and controlling IUU fishing is not well recognized. So it appears that there is limited potential for instituting anti-IUU fishing trade measures in Australia due to this type of specific institutional constructions of IUU. So to end, the Thai fisheries reform is highlighting the state-to-state dialogue where both governments are working closely to address the issue, including the labor rights problem. The Australian case is showing the capacity of the EU policy to influence normatively the framing of IUU as a problem, but the difficulties to translate that into specific domestic contexts has been revealed. And in this case, EU traceability ideals and the mechanisms does not quite fit with the arrangements that Australia have in terms of managing fisheries. So based on these results, we will reflect on the extent to which the EU policy may align with a country's specific contexts. And subsequently, we want to see how much of a diffusion potential this type of unilateral measures hold in terms of fighting IUU fishing on a global scale. So I'll end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for your comprehensive presentation on the IUU fishing. And to shorten the time, I will give Sonja the time to present, and then we can discuss after.
Thank you very much. So again, can you see my slideshow and not the presenter's view, hopefully now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Well, many thanks again to the organizers for this great event, and I'm very happy to present some findings from a survey of small-scale fisheries that I conducted with my colleagues Makino Mitsutaku, Rafael Roman, and Sugimoto Aoi. I should say my name is Sonja GANSEFORTH, and sorry about that. My institutional affiliation is the German Institute for Japanese Studies in Tokyo. I would love to be in Shizuoka today, but I have to stay at home for reasons you can imagine in these times. Well, before we get to the results of the survey, a few words on the background of the study. So, as we have already heard, in the recent days, coastal fishing communities in Japan have been facing difficult challenges in recent decades. Coastal fishing communities here are almost entirely made up of smaller family fishing businesses, but profitability in this sector has decreased, and many businesses are closing or lacking a successor to take over in the future. The number of fishers has therefore decreased from around 240,000 in 2003 to less than 150,000 today. And this shrinkage is of course connected to the demographic dynamics of outmigration and aging in rural Japan in general. And you can also see in this graph actually that most of the fishers are over the age of 55. Despite this difficult situation, though, Japanese fishery cooperatives, and we have heard a lot about that in the session before, they are rather famous for their bottom-up co-management in small-scale communities, a model that is considered successful for achieving sustainable and equitable resource management. So every 5 or 10 years, respectively, fishing rights are allocated to cooperatives for their members to use as a kind of common pool resource. However, the shrinking numbers of fishers also means that the membership in the cooperatives is shrinking rapidly, and this is heavily impacting the organization's finances and also their abilities to function smoothly. So this has forced many cooperatives to merge with neighboring cooperatives, leading to other problems that I can't go into now. But Now we have the recent fishery law reform, which is further challenging the hegemonic role of cooperatives in the coastal fisheries. And this is actually the first reform of the fishery law in 70 years. The reform bill was passed in late 2018 and ratified 2 years later. And it aims to open up coastal waters to corporate investments from wider stakeholders outside, and thereby to revitalize local fishery communities and also to boost domestic production of seafood. The reform also promises more scientific oversight and top-down resource regulation, for example, with the introduction of total allowable catch and individual quota systems for around 100 species, rather than the 8 species today. Now, let's have a look at what Japanese fishers think about these developments. So, because of the pandemic, it was not possible for me in the last years to conduct ethnographic field research as before. And therefore, last year, with the kind support of the National Federation of Fisheries Cooperative Association, the Zengyoren in Japan, I conducted a nationwide survey among coastal fishing households in cooperation with Makino Mitsutaku, Rafael Roman, and Sugimoto Aoi. And the questionnaires were sent out, and survey data was collected by a Japanese survey research company. We received a total of 740 responses. However, due to the logistics and also the politics maybe of the survey distribution, unfortunately, we have a considerable bias in the geographical distribution of responses. So overall, the majority of responses came from prefectures in Kyushu and northeastern Japan, with also good representation from Shikoku, especially the Seto Inland Sea. And there are actually 5 prefectures that have gathered around 50% of all the responses, and they are Fukuoka, Kagawa, Iwate, Fukushima, and Miyagi. So there's actually lots of responses, in particular from those prefectures in northeastern Japan that suffered the most from the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake and its consequences. And also, there's a clear lack of representation from fishers along the Sea of Japan. So this is a bit unfortunate. But let me first present some main findings of the survey before looking at the governance aspects in more detail. So most fishers thought the current situation was bad, and they expected that it was going to get worse in the future even. And not many fishing businesses have a successor, and not many, quite sadly, wish for their children to take over the business in the future. And besides environmental and resource problems, economic factors such as high costs and low producer prices constituted another major problem for fishers, as well as recently, of course, problems connected to the novel coronavirus pandemic. There seems to be a strong awareness of the risks of climate change and environmental destruction, maybe sometimes even to the point of blaming most resource problems on these seemingly external factors and pushing a responsibility away from fishers as overexploiting resources. But there's also a sense of urgency and need for better resource governance. However, knowledge about the fishery law reform is shockingly low, and the expectations are also very negative about the reform. Eco-labels are also not very well known and rarely applied. Now let's look a bit more into the details. So almost half of the respondents, 44.3%, answered that they did not know about the recent fishery law reform, even though it has the potential to really fundamentally impact their livelihood. So only 3.5% confidently said they knew about it. Some 20% knew about it to some degree, and while a good third had heard about it but did not really know what it was about. And if we look at The sources of information, a large majority of the respondents cited the Cooperative as their main source of information about the reform, which I think is highlighting the importance of this institution again. Those who did say that they had some knowledge about the reform, there was little optimism about the effects. So in this graph, the left side stands for the disagreement with a statement, and the right side stands for agreement. And only 17%, combined 17%, expected fishers to profit from the reform. And only 19% expected some revitalization of fishing villages. And some 30% thought there would be a recovery of fishery resources. Almost half of the respondents think that large fishing enterprises will gain from the reform, while small-scale fishers will lose out. And 46% fear that fishers' income will decrease for a while because of stricter regulations. However, there is quite a wide understanding that fishery resource governance needs to be strengthened, more than half in the first row, and that it cannot continue as it is. That's 40% said that in the second row. And many respondents are indecisive when it comes to the different forms of resource regulation, with a tendency to favor self or cooperative governance. Only less than 10% of respondents felt they were somewhat well informed about eco-labels, such as MSC or ASC, or the Japanese versions that we just heard about, MEL and AEL. 16% thought it would be great if they could register their fishery, while 12.3% thought eco-labels were not fit for their fishery. And only 16% seem to think that their eco-labels would be fit for their fishery. Only a few stated that their fishery was already registered or in the process of being registered with an eco-label, a combined 3% only. Now, the lack of access to information also becomes clear in this graph, and I really apologize for the small print. Here we asked about the degree of inclusiveness and participation in the community and the cooperative, in particular with regard to decision-making. And while a large majority feels well accepted and integrated in the community, and they feel that their wishes are respected in decision-making processes in the cooperative, only 1/3 feels that they can easily access and understand scientific information about the status of stocks and the basis of management decisions. And here, a final slide, we see again that there is a rather negative evaluation of the present situation and pessimistic outlook for the future, which contrasts with a nostalgic view of fisheries in the past, especially so with respect to this situation of their own fishing business, of fishery resources, and the marine environment and climate change. So to wrap up, I think it becomes clear that there's a strong sense of crisis and insecurity about the current situation among coastal fishers and aquaculturalists. And there's also a clear need for better communication of policy goals and reforms to local fishers. But the strong awareness of environmental and climate crises among fishers offers a great opportunity to include fishers in cooperative conservation efforts. But I think this can only be successful if fishers' livelihoods are considered and supported. And finally, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated already existing problems in seafood value chains in Japan, highlighting the need for better value creation in order to increase producer prices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonja, for your presentation and your sharing your research. And now it's time to Q&A. Or doesn't have to be a question, can be also a comment. We have 15 minutes for doing that. You can raise your hand if you have any comment or question. while we wait participants to give some. Okay, there is one. I was about to ask a question, but yeah, please, Kate, you can speak. Hello, Kate, you can unmute your speaker.
I think Suvalak will need to enable her because she's the host.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
There you go.
So I can speak now. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a bit greedy and I've got two questions. Maybe I'll ask one question and put the other one in the chat, and if we've got time, we can get to it. So one question that I'll ask now is for Andrew, and I just thought that perhaps for this audience, it might be good if Andrew, if you could expand on a little bit about why the European IUU laws are so difficult for small-scale fishers, or they have been, for example, to do with a lack of formal regulation being interpreted as illegal, or burdens of paperwork and things like that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a general disadvantage that small-scale fisheries get against the sort of the general IUU, the definition of IUU fishing and sort of the IUU narrative that I was speaking about. So on that sort of general level, yeah, a lot of small-scale fisheries would be classified as IUU fishing, and by different countries, inadvertently, not sort of purposely going after small-scale fisheries, but just according to the laws that they set out, they happen to because a lot of small-scale fisheries are not reported. So, and that sort of narrative has come out a lot, and that can only unfairly can lead to the unfair treatment of small-scale fisheries. When it comes to the EU policy, what I know is not necessarily specific to how the EU policy is targeting small-scale fisheries, but more to do with how EU policy has been, whether they intended or not, has been targeting a lot of countries that have a lot of small-scale fisheries. So a lot of small island developing countries in the Pacific, and also in Africa, also countries in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, etc. So if you look at their track record, and I'm talking about the trade ban portion of their policy, yeah, all these sort of yellow card and red card has been instituted against those countries who are considered sort of still developing, and have a lot of high proportion of the fisheries being small-scale fisheries. So when these countries are threatened with the blanket seafood ban, and when that type of ban actually goes ahead, large industrial sectors in these countries may have sort of lobbying power. They may have more money to sort of adapt and re-engineer themselves, whereas small-scale fisheries are sort of left behind, and yeah, they actually get sort of brunt of the seafood import ban. And when it comes to, I'll just add that when it comes to the catch certification scheme, which applies to all shipment, whether it's small-scale fisheries or industrial fisheries have that sort of system, have been working with that kind of catch documentations. That's part of their sort of modus operandi. Whereas, as you can imagine, small-scale fisheries, that's new to small-scale fisheries. They have to find resources to conform to that system. They need computers or certain systems to get up to speed with that, and that has been a real challenge for a lot of small-scale fisheries, and because of that, they end up not meeting those requirements and falling behind. So I think those are some of the dangers that these trade-based measures can have on small-scale fisheries, and sort of more care and exceptions, and I think those sort of customized approach will be needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Before we go to the Kate second question, is there any comment or question? Well, if no, yeah, maybe I have two questions for Dennis and Mina. I know Rare's for Dennis first. I know Rare approach is like supporting governance at the grassroots level, and how is the decentralization in Philippines can allow grassroots level governance. That's for Dennis. And for Mina, as you mentioned, eco-labeling is expensive, and also, as you also mentioned, that it didn't impact the price, right? And how this can be still supported by prefecture government. So yeah, those. And can you like answer it like briefly on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, for your question on decentralization. I think decentralization is very important in terms of providing grassroots support. No? For one, it provides accountability to local government units, particularly in the performance of their mandates under relevant laws. No? For one, the organization, the strengthening of cooperatives as well as grassroots organizations are one of the mandates of the local government units, which were in this situation, the decentralization would strengthen that mandate by the local government units. And number two, the increase in the budget will hopefully provide support to grassroots organization of having weak resources in terms of grassroots organizing. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your answer, Dennis. Please, Mina.
Thank you for the question. Now the provincial government is considering to support more for the aquaculture eco-labeling because it has more future to export abroad, not really focusing on the local consumption anymore, because I think it's because of the Japanese culture of how we choose the fish, not by the label, but it's more like we look at the fish and looks fresh and then we eat by sashimi. Or so it's quite difficult for the Japanese people to have that image of choosing products by the eco-labeling. Like bananas, there are those Forest Alliance frogs everywhere, but university students have never really realized that it's there. So it might take longer time, unless like as Andrew give us is the information that Japan might be in problem soon when shut down by the EU. So unless there's a very big power of the difficulties without the sustainability, I don't think it's going to move any way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina. And Sonja, will you answer briefly Kat's question?
Sure. The question is about how, because I read it in the chat, how will the new fishery law affect cooperative members? And one big issue is that for now, when fishing rights are allocated, as I said, every 5 or 10 years, depending on the fishery right, the cooperatives get preferential treatment. So they can secure the fishing rights for themselves, but this preferential treatment is now abolished. So if there is a company that can present a convincing plan that they will be able to use the resources or the space more effectively, then they could get the access rights and not the local fishers, not the fishermen. And I'll stop here. I actually have questions also, if there's no other questions, then to the others.
Yeah, I think go ahead. We still have time.
Okay. One is for Mina. Could you explain a little bit the difference between the first and the second MEL label version? Has it become more difficult to fulfill the criteria, or was it just not worth the hassle to do the whole process again for the fishers, so they dropped out? Yeah.
Thank you. I think it got much difficult because of giving up the standards for the international level. Because for the version 1, it has a lot of criticism that it's not really like eco-labeling qualified, but the Japanese government wanted to start up with the system of the eco-labeling, and also they were targeting the Olympics, so they had to increase the numbers of the certified products. So with that international standard of the version 2, I think that there are lots of paperwork to do, and everybody was reluctant to do so, and they really couldn't find the merit, so they didn't proceed. But I found the numbers of when the version 1 finished, there was about 43 or 46, but at the moment, version 2, there's only 13 and 18. And I think it's the different fisheries cooperatives who's applying for that. I really didn't go through the list, but it seems like different people are applying. So maybe most of them have dropped out.
And now it's more like MSC, so not so.
Yes, I think it got much closer. So still concept is for the small scale fisheries for like Japanese, but I'm just wondering how it goes.
Can I ask the other question also, or is there somebody with a question?
Anyone from attendees or other speakers, maybe, if you have any question or comment. Well, if you have like a quick question, yes, Sonja, we have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So the question is to Andrew, and I was wondering if you would contextualize these unilateral IUU standards that you presented. Would you contextualize them in a kind of broader global power struggle to establish standards in foods? For example, also like global gap or HACCP, as it's called in Japanese. I don't even know how to say it in English, but these are kinds of food safety standards as well.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure if these trade-based measures will lead to that sort of like I guess sort of a system of I don't know how to call it, like a thing, whether it's like an eco-labeling or HACCP or something. I'm not quite sure what that would mean, but essentially it's I don't think it's a new thing, the catch documentation scheme. I think it has been developed and used for many years by different actors, or international organizations as well as different countries. And I think the essence of it is that there is a trail of document attached to each shipment that certifies, that verifies that where the fish is coming from, and essentially it's not associated with any IUU processes. And I think that the unilateral, again, the thing about the unilateral is that each country has their own system, has their own specific details, and that might be the challenge for many of the different countries and the small scale fisheries that they have to comply to different rules applied by different countries. So a lot of the analysts are actually calling for more of a coordinated and multilateral system, catch documented system. And actually, yeah, come to think of it, if that happens, then it might become sort of a body of catch documentation scheme that's known by a certain name and that's understood in common by different actors.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I've got a couple questions still, but yeah, the time is up, unfortunately. And once again, thanks for all speakers for sharing the great presentation this afternoon. And yeah, I hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rayhan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.